What is the most significant thing you've done at home, at work, in government, or in the community to help protect our fragile climate? Please name just one action, and if possible, quantify its results. So 90 seconds for this.
Well, I want to thank QCAN for giving me the opportunity to speak to you all tonight. I just want to let you know, before we got these questions, I was thinking I was back in college again and I was going through a course and trying to find all this information. All of you are the activists, all of you are the specialists that understand this a little bit more than I do. I like to facilitate this information to the specialists, bring you all in, and then work on these issues. And that's what I'm facilitating at the city council level, is to allow people like yourselves to have that conversation. This past year, I was in the living room of QCAN, going through a meeting, talking about what we're going to do at the city council level. And what we initiated was the electric cars. What we did with that at the city council level, we brought a resolution forward with Councilor Finn and Councilor Nina Liang. We put it forward to ask the mayor to allow this electric car for some of our fleets of cars out there. That's part of the emissions. We put it forward. We gave it to the mayor to recommend and see if he would like to act on it. And that's what we're initiating. So for me as a councilor at large, what I've done over the last 2 years has initiated some type of progress with allowing and facilitating this information. I listened to all of you. I listened to QCAN, and I moved it forward. That's what I'm willing to do in the next 2 years as your councilor at large. Thank you.
Thank you. Representing Ward 1 for the last 8 years, I represented the most vulnerable coastal district in our community, and I've spent a lot of time working on this matter. Right off the top of my head, it can talk about tide gate controls at Post Island, our coastal infrastructure, the repairs to the seawalls, the outfalls, the removing of silt from our catch basins being cleaned. Our marsh restoration project, I remember working with the Neponset River Watershed Association, and we were working on a project in the Neponset River. We were able to leverage those funds and bring them over to Broadmeadows Marsh. We did a 40-acre salt marsh restoration in Broadmeadows Marsh. By show of hands, who's walked out Broadmeadows Marsh? It is spectacular. I was just there this past weekend with my family walking the dog. Marsh restoration, these soft solutions. As we were bringing forward some of the seawall planning for the section we're working on now, we got a grant for that. I actually brought the engineer, brought him around, showed him the most vulnerable areas, talked about repetitive loss, talked about why it was so important in advocating for us to qualify for this funding, and we talked about what are the other soft solutions, what can we do on the water side of the wall, what about natural breakwaters, what about some of these artificial reefs, what about opportunities to slow that wave energy down on the water side of the wall, so we're preventing the homes and reducing flooding. I think we've done a lot of work at the city with the citywide seawall assessment to reduce flooding. Edgewater Drive, one of the worst chronic flood areas, has been dry. We've replaced that outfall pipe, and these are projects not only did I advocate for, I worked on, I executed and stayed in touch with my constituents.
Thank you. I know I'm short on time, but I do just want to take a moment to thank all of you at QCAN for having us here tonight. So the question of what we've done in our personal lives or what we've done at work to move towards reducing our carbon footprint here in the world. When I was working with my family's restaurant group, as I'm sure all of you are aware, restaurants have a lot of waste, whether it's the takeout containers, the takeout materials, or the food itself. And one of the 10 restaurants that we opened and that I had a part and was able to open, we actually were opening in a LEED certified building, and so we went to composting, and it was new for all of us, the staff, the management team, but it was a great benefit. We found that although on the front end it looked like it was going to be more costly because we had to pay for different bags, we had to pay for training for our staff to make sure that we're sorting things properly. On the back end, we ended up saving money in less than a year. The reason for that is because what we were throwing out in waste was in compost, and the cost to actually compost was less than what we were paying for the trash. And so we found that the amount that we paid for trash removal in the building went down. So our cost went down with the landlord, and then our cost for composting ended up balancing out, that we had more savings than not. So that's just one example, and that's something I'd like to bring forward as my role as your city councilor as well. We have a lot of growth, a lot of development here in this city. There's no reason why we can't implement that same LEED certified mentality, to get all of our apartments and the new restaurants to go forward with composting, and that's just one step that we can make, I believe, to, again, reduce our carbon footprint. Thank you.
Again, I'd like to thank everybody for being here tonight. So this isn't something that's new to me. I've been following the issues of greenhousing for many years, and the reality of it is that we have to do more in the city of Quincy. Personally, at our own home, we do recycling, we do composting, and in the schools, in the Quincy Public Schools, while I've been on the school committee for the last 12 years, we were encouraging education in the schools to make sure that kids understood the value of recycling, composting, and the things that they can do in the future for themselves. I see one of the teachers here in the audience here tonight. The reason why this is so important is that the solutions that we are having now, it's getting more cost effective for us to be able to bring those solutions to Quincy, but we're kind of behind the 8 ball of what we're doing. And we need to get more proactive in our community so that we can actually catch up to where we need to be. But we also have to make sure that we're putting the information in the schools so that our students have the opportunity to see the future of where they want to go, because it's an economic engine as well. It's the future for where they're going to be going to. So there's multi-prongs to the environment that we need to be looking at. And we have to look at it globally too, because we have a lot of responsibility that's happening here in the city of Quincy. The development that we're having, we have to also look at what we're doing and how we're doing it in the city, because it is impacting our community, because we're not taking into consideration where those waters are going to go. And that is one of the reasons why we've had so many problems in the city of Quincy with flood issues. So this is a big issue. It's not going to be solved in 90 seconds, but it is something that we do have to discuss and stay on top of and be proactive about it. And we haven't been proactive enough. But I thank everybody for being here, because it's a beginning. Thank you.
Thank you, QCAN, for the invitation. Thank you all for coming. It's a pleasure for me to be here. My name is Dan Raimondi, and I'm one of the candidates for council at large. Out of the many things that I've accomplished, both in my personal life as well as publicly, what I'd like to focus on tonight, or to answer this particular question, is open space. Because I think that's on the minds of perhaps many of you, in having a long-range, not only plan, but also a funding source to guarantee that whatever the needs of the city are, whether it's an economic upturn or an economic downturn, there's a steady funding source that can provide the necessary revenue in order to enhance, rehabilitate our parks, playgrounds, open space acquisition, beaches, and so forth and so on. So we start with the city budget, and we know that police, fire, schools usually have the top priority, as well they should. And if things are not going so well, things like open space acquisition, obviously playground maintenance, things like that, take a turn for the worse. So I decided to do something about it. And I wrote a hotel-motel legislation that in the beginning had tremendous amount of opposition. But we persevered and led the way. And since the enactment of that law, signed by the council, signed by the mayor, approved by the House of Representatives, Senate, signed by the governor, $15 million have come into the city strictly to improve our parks, playgrounds, open space acquisition, and beaches. Thank you very much.
I definitely agree that we should be clean. We should have a clean city. We should be efficient. I believe all those things. But there's one thing that is on my mind, and that is, how far do we go? What I want to say is, what do the people want? Do they want somebody who is looking out for their best interests, who, yes, wants to modernize but not globalize, someone who wants the best for the city and lower the costs as much as possible that they have to pay out of pocket for their taxes? Or do they want somebody who's a salesman for special interests, who wants to peddle every single cottage industry of the global warming industry? I come with a little bit more knowledge. I'm a software engineer with 30 years of experience. I have my name on a patent. I developed surgery over the internet. So I understand a lot of things about technology, and I've been studying this issue for years. And please elect me. Thank you very much.
What would be your target for renewable energy as a percentage of the city's energy use?
So right now, the Massachusetts public policy requires 15% of municipal energy to come from renewables by 2020. It increases to 25% by 2030, 45% by 2050. These are great goals, and I hope we achieve and exceed these levels before they're required. Ideally, I'd like to see Quincy reach 100% and have net zero energy.
Thank you for the question. I too would be really excited if we were able to do 100% of our power be with renewable energy, but I think our strength as a municipality is actually in reduction of the energy that we have right now. So I know that the city has set out a goal along with QCAN to have a 20% reduction over the course of 4 years, and I believe in the beginning of that we're reaching about 1% of that 4% over the 5 years. And so I'd like to reinvigorate that process and that program to see if we could do another 20 in the next 5 years and reduce it by 4% each year. You know, I was on the council when we were able to change over the lighting from LED streetlights, over to LED streetlights, and over time, that's actually going to save us 40% in energy savings to set one conversion alone. So as your councilor, I'd like to continue to move forward with ideas like that so we can reduce our overall energy use. Thank you.
So again, Quincy came up with the plan in 2012 and it's 2017, and we haven't had a re-benchmarking to know what really we are doing in the city of Quincy. So when it comes to our greenhouse emissions that we are exhausting in the city of Quincy, we need to know what we need to go after first. Everything is after what we should be going after first, but really what we should be focusing on is our buildings and making sure that they're the most energy efficiency that they possibly can be. And with our focus being by 2050 that we're 100% efficient within our buildings, and if we could shoot for 80% for our community, that would be great. That's a stretch though without benchmarking within the city to understand exactly how we're going to go about doing that and analyzing it more often than once every 5 years. We should be doing it every year and getting a report on the council to know how well we're doing.
I agree with what has been said. The city's goal, the ultimate goal, ought to be 100%. We ought not to be satisfied or comforted with 20, 40, 50, 60. The goal ought to be consistent movement positively towards that particular goal. And we need to have an identifiable plan. So there needs to be an inventory and an audit so that each and every aspect of renewable energy is targeted with a certain percentage if that matter has been resolved and within a particular period of time. So it's important that with the LED conversion and with solar, we're pretty much, we're nearing the 20%, but we need to have that improvement each and every year to attain our ultimate goal, which is 100% renewable energy.
I was there in the city council meeting when they voted for the LED lights, and I don't know if you're aware of it, of what the cost to the taxpayer is. What I'm trying to say is there has to be a balance between energy savings and the cost to the taxpayer. And that's what we're looking for all of these goals. Thank you.
As everybody said earlier, I'd like to go with benchmarks on a yearly basis, starting with 20% and see what we can do in 5% increments over a year, 3-year, 5-year, and 10-year benchmarks to see where we're at. You know, I would like to target and focus on the renewable energy from direct sunlight and heating and lighting for our buildings and our public buildings. Being on the school committee 3 years ago, we installed all the solar panels on every single school, 19 schools, and we turned the switch on and we got some renewable energy. That was a start in going into the right direction for our schools. As we did our roof replacements, we also did the solar panels, and that was moving in as well as the LED lighting. Thank you.
If the city could take any action to combat climate change, not including the things we are already doing, which action would get the most dramatic results in cost savings and/or greenhouse gas reductions? And what will you as a city councilor do to encourage Quincy to take this action? 2 minutes or less.
I think there's a number of things that we could be doing simultaneously as a city to reduce our footprint. A couple of them that come to mind that I'd like to initiate right away is one that I had touched upon earlier with the composting. Again, being LEED certified as a building is a national recognition, and in order to go ahead and get that certification, you have to go through a lot of steps in that building, such as making sure that recycling is happening, hazardous waste is being disposed of properly, trash is going in the right containers, everything is being sorted, and composting for those buildings that also have food facilities inside those places. Again, we are growing very quickly as a city. A lot of buildings are going up. And even if you don't have an office park with, restaurants on the bottom, you do have apartment buildings, and these apartment buildings do generate waste in both recycling, trash, and composting, and we're not doing that yet. And so moving forward, I would like to incentivize these buildings to move in that direction right away before they start building. If they're already developed, they can still go down that process, and that's something that I'd like to do in ways of either contracting out with the company that can give us competitive pricing, working with our current buildings to create separate bins for this, or working with our current office parks to make sure that inside each office they have accessibility to these 3 bins as well. Another thing I'd like to work on is making sure that we have charging stations to promote the use of electric vehicles across the city. Again, going back to development, we are changing our infrastructure. We're changing a lot of sort of the core downtown areas of our city. And as we're building new buildings and fixing the sidewalks, putting up new streetlights, and putting up new trees, so too should we also look at putting in charging stations, because it's not just the folks that would be living in this building in the future. Folks now here in Quincy are moving towards use of electric vehicles, and we need to make sure that we're promoting that and that we have accessibility for folks to come in and use that. Thank you.
So thank you very much. This is a 3-pronged issue when it comes to how we can promote and utilize and mitigate the problems in the city of Quincy. One of the things that we have to do is we started with the solar energy, but we need to buy more alternative energy for our city to be able to do things. It has to be for solar. It can be, we have to research and we have to understand wind power. We have to look at alternative ways to be able to power our city. It might be even with microgrids. We have to find other ways to actually bring solutions to the city of Quincy. The other thing is we need to save more. The idea that energy efficiency is costing us more in the taxpayers, it's actually going to cost us less if we invest correctly, but we can save more by actually looking at our buildings again and focusing on that goal to get them 100% efficient by the time 2050 rolls around. And those new buildings that we're building that are municipalities, they need to be self-sufficient net zero buildings, and we need to look into those to figure out how we can afford to do that and cost it out over time to make sure it's an investment that we can afford and it's an investment that's well worth putting our money into. And then finally, we need to promote other ways to be able to bring solutions to the city of Quincy. And electric vehicles are those, but it's not just for cars, it's for buses. It can be our school buses. The cost of a school bus might cost us more money in the investment up front, but it lasts longer and the fuel costs are actually less money. And there's other things we need to be looking at in the city of Quincy so that we can focus on our future, because it's a health risk when you have those gases that are coming out that are causing health concerns for us. If we had electric vehicles, that would prevent some of those health concerns that we have. It is also an educational opportunity for our students within our schools, and there's also an economic engine part that's driving. If we promote and we actually live by the rules of making our city a green city, we entice people to come here and open businesses to be here in the city of Quincy. So it's not just about buying, but it's also about the future. And then it's also, finally, I'll always go back to education, because it's an opportunity, once again, to bring those solutions into our schools and educate our students on how to be the future leaders in these as we go forward. So we have to look at it as a full global opportunity for the city of Quincy, and then bring it back into how it can be promoted all the way from schools all the way to our seniors, and how it can be the tax incentives can be here too. There's grants as well. There's so many ways we can go, but we can't go until we start actually doing it, and doing it is now.
It's disappointing that in 2017, with a $300 million budget, we don't have an electric vehicle in our public fleet. Resolutions are not enough. I'll be very disappointed over the next cycle between this election and the next if we don't have at least one electric vehicle. I think it's important that we send a signal that the city continues to send proper messages to even the private companies and private homeowners that electric vehicles as part of a fleet is the best way to go. But I want to talk about making Quincy a multi-dimensional transportation city, walking, bicycling, things like that. So we need to keep on moving to improve our infrastructure, our roads. Our roads need tremendous repair, and that affects gas mileage. We need to fix our sidewalks so folks can walk better. We need to have a bike sharing program, bicycle racks. We need charging stations both for the public as well as private companies. So if we're permitting locations with garages, we need to make sure that they have charging stations. So it's a more comprehensive look at removing vehicles off of the streets, having people feel safe and friendly, that they can walk. Bicyclists have lanes that they can properly navigate. And the good work that's been done in the school system, we need to replicate that across the city with our public buildings. You know, that would be the next horizon for tightening windows, repairing doors, tightening up the infrastructure, continue to remove infiltration into our sewer system. That's huge, to make sure that all of our infrastructure programs are working properly. So for me, it's more of a holistic, comprehensive approach to make sure that we're doing everything we can to get to that renewable energy goal.
You know, like I say, I look at this and I say, we need to be balanced between the cost to the taxpayers and the money that it will save in the long run and the efficiency. I'm all for efficiency, like I said, but to me, there's another agenda. I saw a YouTube video. It was really good. It was a table a little bigger than this, and it had marbles that were stacked up very high. And then the person took out and said, okay, that's the amount of CO2 in the atmosphere. And he took out about maybe 4 or 5 marbles. And he basically said, what they want you to do is to shackle yourselves so that you can take 1 marble away to decrease the global CO2. And it's, when you look at it in perspective, it's laughable. I was there at the State House to testify against the carbon tax with another person in the audience here who is running for state rep. And we basically came forward and testified the reality of the situation. And I'm like I say, I'm all for being efficient, but there's a limit, and you have to have the wisdom to understand the difference. And if you're looking for someone who with the wisdom to look at, to say, okay, does Quincy really need this? Is it going to be really helpful? Then please vote for me. Thank you.
Thank you. First off, we need to educate the public, and by doing that, we have a lot of different resources we can do that. We have a citywide website. We can also use other sites like Nextdoor and other sites where people can get on electronically and push this information, like activists like yourself, to get this information out there. Have consensus, have different meetings on these things. What we're, constituent service be involved with this as well at the mayor's office, the administration, the city council, the school committee, where everybody can collaborate, give this information and communication. We're looking to reduce, reuse, and recycle. Some of the topics that come to my head is use less heat and air conditioning inside our buildings, drive less and more efficient vehicles, obviously they have talked about, buy more efficient products, appliances, do something what the stores do like Home Depot and Lowe's, where they give you back a rebate for $50 if you buy the new appliance, whether it be a refrigerator or dishwasher. Return the old one, take in the new one. We should be doing that and outfitting all our appliances through the city of Quincy as well. Giving rebates back to our consumers like yourself in the city of Quincy, having a rebate program for that. Use less water, obviously. We can hand wash. We can use it by cold or warm water. And also have computerized light systems where when you leave this building today, in 15 seconds it's going to go off, and have that outfitted even in churches like this that are a little older. And like I said before, we need to educate, encourage others to conserve in general. Thank you.
So I'm just going to repeat the question. It was, if the city could take any action to combat climate change, not including things we're already doing, which action could get the most dramatic results in cost savings and greenhouse gas reductions? How many of you have noticed the public outreach campaign about the gas leaks? So you've seen the phone poles with the signs on them notifying a gas leak. Have you noticed those in your neighborhood by show of hands? Yeah? So you'll be out walking in the neighborhood, and on the phone pole, you could have a missing pet, or now they're having a PR campaign about, hey, be aware there's a gas leak in your area. Every time I leave Blessed Sacrament Church, there's a strong gas odor. They haven't fixed it. I've personally called it in, and it's a matter of it encroaches the MWRA sewer line, so we're having that addressed when we're addressing the sewer. But I want to hold National Grid accountable. This is having a major impact in the greenhouse gases in our community. I would recommend the mayor and the public works director partner with National Grid to encourage they repair these long-standing leaks to their infrastructure, and they help reduce the greenhouse gases in our community. I've lived in the house I grew up in, and we recently had the gas main replaced maybe 10 years ago. And no, 8. I was new to office at the time, and I was speaking with National Grid about what the expectations were. And the employee said to me, my first day on the job 30 years ago, I worked on this leak in front of your own home. They've never fixed it. I would like to see more extensive and inclusive community engagement as to what effects these gas leaks have and what role the general public can take through these advocacy channels. These utilities are not too big for us to take on. Case in point, I'm working and partnering with Councilor Kroll on the Spectre compressor station. That's a federal application, a lot of homework, the environmental permitting alone. They're reading about the desolate area, and I'm over here saying, geez, I live across the water and I've seen the bald eagle and the most wildlife I've ever seen. This isn't a desolate area. We need to protect these environments, and we need to hold these utilities accountable.
Do you know Quincy's recycling rate? Does anybody, you can raise your hand. If you know the recycling rate, how many people?
I know Ward 1 has the highest recycling rate because we have big barrels.
Oh.
The pilot program proved to be true. If you increase the barrel, they increase the rate. So Ward 1 had a pilot Monday trash rate. I don't know who sent it.
So the percentage overall is 15%. So only 15% are recycling. Which is quite poor compared to other towns and cities in Massachusetts of the same size. So the question for Ann Mahoney is, what advantages would result from increasing our recycling rate, and how could the city make it happen in 90 seconds or less?
So one of the things that we do and we need to do better at is educating the public on the value of recycling. I know that we talk about cost, but really educating them and also teaching them. There's so many ways that we can teach them. We have QATV that we can use. We have a website. We have YouTube that we can teach them, and really kind of educate people. Cambridge does it really great, where they go out to things that are going on in the community, and they talk about their recycling and they talk about their composting, and they do it in a YouTube fashion where it's getting people excited and engaged. And we have to do that. The excitement has to start though, right from City Hall, right from the mayor's office all the way down, and it has to go through the mayor's office to the DPW to the schools and out to the general public. And really, when you talk about recycling, sometimes people don't think it's very glamorous, but knowing what you can recycle, how you can recycle, and how you can package that recycling bin and make it a challenge in your own home. You can even create an atmosphere where it can be, students can win things, or our families can be engaged to win things. But we really have to make it so that the whole community is engaged and want to recycle. I use an example of my dad. My dad's 90 years old. He saves the newspaper plastic, and he recycles the newspapers into these cute little tubes, and it's like a whole week's worth of newspapers that he throws out, but it's very organized and very packaged well. And the reason why I say that is my kids have been taught that too. And when you actually look at different generations and how they're approaching things, it's something that we all do, but we need to encourage people and be able to educate them on how we can do it and make it part of the whole community and be engaged in everything that we do, from every environment that we do it to.
As Commissioner of Public Works, it was one of our goals to educate the public and go into the schools and educate the youngsters about the significance of recycling, not only for the environment, but also the economic reality is, at the time that I became commissioner, we were spending about $90 to dispose of our trash, $90 a ton. And we renegotiated that contract and got it under $70 a ton. Actually, it was closer to $100 when I became the commissioner. There was about a $3 million savings over a 10-year period by doing that. Recycling is a significant way for the city not only to attain its goal of having zero trash and having the recyclables being used to convert to energy, and that's what perhaps can happen and/or reuse back into society. But it's a way for us to save money as well. So when we renegotiated the contract with our trash collector, we mandated in the contract that they make a robot for us, and we put that robot to good use. Mr. Leonard is here. Those of you who may know him, the science instructor at retired from Quincy High School. And we go into every third grade class and teach those kids the significance and the importance of recycling. We did 2 newsletters a year promoting recycling, twice a year, and all the other programs that we have trying to get the word out that recycling is a very important aspect of what we should be doing as a city. Thank you.
I have to say I agree with a lot of what has been said, but to understand things, you've got one thing on one end with the taxes going up, and then you've got the other with trying to become globalized and trying to reduce energy. I understand reducing energy. I do, because some of the stuff I designed, I worked on some of that stuff. But basically, there is a state Senate bill, S 1959. It is going into a hearing on October 24th, and it is to put the toll roads on all of the roads around us, so you won't be able to have a go anywhere without a transponder and paying a toll. And they're going to toll different vehicles of different rates to control your choices. And I started a statewide ballot initiative to try to get ahead of this. And I will be there to testify on October 24th that people do not need this invasion into their privacy. And I am at large looking out for people, whether I'm elected or not. And that is who I am. Thank you.
Let's rewind for 2 years ago. I sat in the same exact seat, spoke to you about the recycling program and how we want to initiate a new recycling barrel system into the city of Quincy. I put that forward, and it's up at the mayor's office right now. It's something that's an investment. It's not a cost, it's not an expense, it's an investment, because we'll get the return back. And the return is that the trash will be 64 gallons, and the recycle will be 96 gallons. So you're going to force people out there to recycle, and that's going to educate them to start with. Then we need to educate the public on how to do this. In Abington right now, if you don't put your recyclable out, they won't take your trash. So how do we, as a city council, come in and put an ordinance in or put a rule in and initiate this? You have to put your recyclable out that's 96 gallon, or they won't take your trash for 64 gallon. Trash could pile up really fast, couldn't they? And it also forces the consumer or the person in that household to recycle. It's a great way the Abington did a good job with that. I've asked other people, and they say, you know what? I have to do it, so I do it. And it actually, in the long run, saves money. This is something that Quincy needs to move forward. We need to look outside the other municipalities and what they're doing and what's working for them and institute it here in the city of Quincy. The next 2 years, I'll be looking to institute this as an investment, not a cost. Thank you.
Thank you. I agree. Like I just mentioned, the larger size barrels, it's a visibility, it's an awareness that they see. You know, we all know in this room, we're all environmental advocates. You know, you can go to DPW, get a sticker, put it in a barrel. I put out 2 barrels of recycle a week and a half a barrel of trash. We have very small trash output in our home. The city has a lot of opportunity to increase this rate. I'm really disappointed to hear how low it is. The multi-unit developments, I know as we're permitting new projects, it is part of our discussion about incorporating recycle and designing it into the buildings. When a lot of the older high-rises were built in our city, recycling was not streamlined in our community. What about our municipal buildings? What are we doing? And the council, those who are up here with me on the council know I literally check the trash after every council meeting because there's always paper in the barrel, and I am the one pulling it out and putting it in the recycle bin. It's true. Ask them, all the offices. I think every single trash barrel needs to have a recycle barrel next to it. I really feel there's an opportunity. I know the high schools, and I see him here, has some green teams. What opportunities are there through community events? And I've seen them out there. They do a great job. In fact, they have artistic recycle bins. I really feel engaging them and empowering them to help improve our goals for our recycle rate could be beneficial to the city. Thank you.
Thank you. So I believe that there are a lot of advantages to increasing the amount of recycling that we have here in the city. I am also appalled that it's only 15%. That is incredibly low, and I think it's something we need to work on from all fronts, whether it's the private life or public life, in our public buildings or in our homes. I think some of the advantages to having increased recycling, are going to be long-term, but education is, of course, one of them. We need to make sure that we're starting young, we're going into the schools, we're teaching kids, we're offering materials for them to bring home to their parents, because then you're not just starting with the child that you're talking to so that they can then, in effect, implement these things as they get older, but you're reaching the families through these kids as well with the schools. We did have a program in the city where you get a discount card when you go to pick up a recycling bin. A lot of families across the city I see have the older, smaller bins. And if we're going to promote recycling, we need to incentivize folks here to get the larger bins so they can recycle more within that 1 week period. I had the opportunity to travel last year actually to Taiwan, and we talked to the mayor of Taipei there, and his city councilor, one of his city councilors, was scratching his head, and he said, "We can't figure it out." And I said, "What's that?" And he said, "We put out this program to enforce recycling, and if you mixed it, then you would get fined for it." And so a lot of families across Taipei, the city, had upped their recycling. So the amount of waste went down about 20%. The amount of recycling went up 15%. They can't figure out what their extra 5% went, right? Where did that trash go? And, they were all sitting there and they all laughed like that, and we did too as well. But I think the point to that was people had less waste. And that's what we need to do here, because at the end of the day, that's going to help with the rodent problem that we have here. It's going to make sure that we're being mindful as well as a city. And at the end of the day, I can't say it enough, it's going to help us save costs. Thank you.
The city is planning to give all residents standard-sized trash and recycling carts. Would you sponsor a measure in the city council telling the city to add a third cart for food waste, which would then be sent out for composting, or composting bins for people's yards? As you answer, keep in mind that composting would cost us less per ton than what we're paying to burn our food waste, and that it would substantially reduce greenhouse gas emissions.
What I would prefer to do is that we have a pilot program, and we invite, there are a number of companies out there. Some dispose of the organic, others recycle it, and some use it. They would sell the organics to farms, some would use the organic to create better compost, and others would burn it. So there are companies out there that if a group like QCAN or others, if they agree to have so many customers for this, there's one company that sorry about that. So I would prefer to have a pilot program, and if you get a company, if sufficient enough residents sign up for this program, they will recycle the school's organics at no cost. So there are some exciting opportunities there, and it's a terrific way to save money. DEP indicates that perhaps half of our trash is organic. You take that out, we can save a tremendous amount of money. But I think we have to make sure that it's workable, because that could have negative consequences if it does not. So I think the combination of a private company and what I suggest may very well work. Thank you.
I agree that if there's better ways of disposing with trash, we definitely should do them. I don't agree with things like buying special containers with RFID chips on it to track people as to what they output. That's simply invasion of privacy. I believe that there should be some sort of a method for separation of trash, and it should be disposed of properly. And if it can be composted, great. I'm all for that, but it requires research.
If you could you repeat the question? Could you repeat the question?
Yes, sorry. So to increase our low recycling rates, the city's planning to give residents a standard-sized trash and recycling carts. Would you sponsor a measure in the city council telling the city to add a third cart for food waste, which would then be sent out for composting, or even composting bins for people's yards? And 30 seconds.
As we do this new recycling program, this would be a great time to install this program, food waste, as that third measure. We're looking forward into the future here for the next 2 years. It's something we have to consider. The mayor's looked at this. The city council's looked at this. I've talked about this prior. 2 years ago, it was in the newspaper, the Patriot Ledger, talking about what we're going to do down the road. You as activists have told us, I've sat down in QCAN's living room in the meeting talking about this exact measure. I'd like to institute it into the next sphere with our recyclability and our food waste and our new recycling program. Thank you.
Thank you. A couple of years ago, I took a trip out to Seattle and visited friends out there, and I was very surprised that they had curbside composting. That was very new to me. I actually came home, went to DPW. We were selling the composters out of DPW, bought one for my own household waste. I think this is a great creative idea. I'd love to see something piloted.
The answer to the question, yes. Absolutely, we should be doing composting. I feel like a broken record because I've been talking about this so much, but we really do have net savings from composting. Yes, on the onset, it's a little bit more expensive because you are buying different bags. They do not have chips in them. Ours didn't anyways. But, again, at the end of the day, we saw real savings. As a business, what we're paying for our waste every week ended up getting reduced in less than a year, even though we were paying for those new bags. Quincy has an opportunity to be a real leader in this right now. We have examples from the West Coast. We can set the example on the East Coast for our neighbors here in New England, and hopefully even further. We can go ahead, start composting in the buildings we currently have, and make sure that any new buildings coming down the pike are also doing that, and offer incentives to residents across the city and make sure that they understand, yes, it might be expensive on the front end, but in the long run, you will end up saving money. So yes, absolutely we should. Thank you.
I think absolutely we should too, but I'm going to take a step back. Before we jump into the let's get going and have it on the sidewalks, I think we really have to look at what Cambridge has done, what Arlington has done, what Somerville has done. They've been successful. They started a pilot program. They got grants to do it. They investigated what their community's desires were. They found that they educated the public and they brought people to the table and they had people ready to do the pilot. We need to do that here in Quincy too, because the way you make something successful is by bringing it to the people who want to do it first and let them show you the way. If you just go out and just make it something for the community, we're not going to be successful, because if you're enforcing it on people, they're not going to do it, and we're going to have really small percentages of people doing it. So we really need to look at our community, see who wants to do it, and really educate the population on this pilot program about how it can be successful and how much money it can save. But I would want to encourage the conversation, bring it to the table, and create a real success plan for us so we're out of the gate, we are successful.
Let's say the city government decided to increase knowledge of climate and energy use among Quincy residents. Name 3 or more city departments that should have a role in such a campaign, and specify what each of these departments would do to raise awareness. 90 seconds or less.
Well, I would definitely study all the resources in the city, and I would study all the past initiatives, and I would I would look at other cities and how they deal with this, and we can compile all of that data, and then we can choose exactly what we want to do based upon the cost savings, what it would do to reduce energy, what it would do to help Quincy be much better at protecting itself in the future against problems. And I would look at all of those issues and come to a decision. I crunch data at work all the time. I design surgery over the internet, and so I look at all these things, and it comes down to spreadsheets and basically looking at your options and determining what is the best way to go.
The 3 departments I would be looking at would be constituent service, which Larry Liuzzo from the mayor's department heads, getting a consensus of whether it be through email, through mail, a single body, the first body, to actually get this information out. I'd also look for planning and community development. Jim Fatsy's in the planning department. How are we going to institute new public buildings, new things that come in front of the planning board, and how to initiate energy efficiency? And also public works, the DPW. What are we doing with our infrastructure improvements, and how do we elaborate this together? All 3 departments must work together. And I probably would say that every department in the city is going to be involved in this process. You need to continue to educate and have everybody on the same table, on the same playing field. You can't leave one department out without keeping the other ones in tune with this. This is something that has to be at every department. So constituent service is getting the information out to all of you. Thank you.
City initiatives need buy-in by all the city departments, but let's make sure we value our nonprofit partners like an organization like Quincy Community Action Network. The planning department manages projects that cross multiple departments. It would be great to engage on this. I strongly advocated for Quincy to become a green community and to hire an energy manager. Our public building department has been innovative in this area, and Shelley Dean, our energy manager, is a great resource. I would suggest the public works department in our public schools. John Sullivan at DPW has done a terrific job with his public outreach campaigns, utilizing QATV and social media and the DPW newsletter. Did you know that's one of the top hits on the city website? Our students are able to affect change for our future and often can educate their own parents. As a city councilor, I think it's important for ourselves to be engaged on this. I pride myself on my communications platform informing my constituents, and I would promote these messages through my website, margaretlaforest.com, my e-newsletter, the social media channels. I also serve on the Massachusetts Municipal Association Energy and Environment Committee and would recommend engaging them in the Metropolitan Area Planning Council. We have resources available to our municipality. We need to engage everybody to promote the environmental awareness and improvements for our community.
I do want to acknowledge that DPW, public buildings, planning, and community development, those are all important. They have a role in this, but that's to implement these programs. And we need to build a bridge between these departments that implement and those that educate. And so the first of the three would be the Quincy Public Schools. Again, you know, if you start with the kids and you're educating them on the importance of whatever initiative we take, whether it's the composting or the recycling, through that you can get back to the parents and from there to the family as well and expand out from there. The libraries are a great resource. We have a number of them across the city here, and they can allow for residents to come to them and not only be educated, but then tap into those resources, like with the DPW or with planning, to implement any programs that they would like to do in their own personal homes. The third would be the Asian Outreach Coordinator department in the city. You know, close to 30% of our population here in the city are Asian Americans, and a number of that percentage does not speak English. And so working with the Asian coordinator is important because anything that we try to implement here in the city, we want to make sure that everyone in our community is able to take advantage of that and to take part of that. Thank you.
So we're all touching upon some of the very similar things: education, public works, cross-pollinating the information through all the departments, but it all starts at the top. The mayor's office has to be actively engaged in the community and want to make our community a green community. So we need the mayor to take an active role. We need the mayor to be part of the climatemayors.org organization so that we can learn what other communities are doing and bring it back here to Quincy. You can't do anything in Quincy with the multiple departments unless you don't have a leader who wants to lead us in that direction. So we have to start at the mayor's office. Public Works is another important one because as we're developing these things and instituting them, we have to make sure that it's actually happening. So we have to actually engage and make sure our departments are all working together, and education is always going to be part of the solution because as we are educating our students and educating our population, all of those are outreaches to everybody in our community. And when we do all those things together, we are an educated community. We are bringing the right solutions here to Quincy. We're learning and actively engaging with other communities and being part of the solution, bringing those solutions that can be retrofitted here into the city and making them happen here today. The other things that we have that are resources to us here in the city is obviously our internet, and we also have QATV. It's another arm that we can reach out to and educate people on, so seniors that may not be using the internet will also be able to be actively engaged. It's important that we use those newsletters that we're sending out and letting people know the things that we're doing and how they can get more information. We have to work collaboratively across departments to be able to do this, but it all starts at the top with the mayor's office and a council that actually engages the mayor to make sure that this is something that we're doing for our community, not just for today, but for the future, for our city.
I would start with schools because it's the biggest user of energy that we have within the city. It's been reported that as much as 60% of our energy use comes from our schools, so that's where we need to not only get the word out, but obviously that's where a great degree of the savings may wind up coming from in the years to come. So the education of the youngsters and the parents and that all the administrative and the professional staff, all the employees of the Quincy Public Schools all working together on the same page, turn lights off, shut off electronics, things of that nature that could make a tremendous amount of difference as we click towards that 100% goal. Obviously, public works, coastal resiliency, all those aspects, whether roads need to be elevated, seawalls, making sure our infrastructure is properly being maintained and developed. So public works needs to be a significant component. Planning, not only to obtain resources, grants, but also to make sure that the private sector is doing what it can as development comes into the city, to be mindful that we are a city of 27 miles of waterfront, and we are a city that wants to be towards our goal of 100% renewable energy. So schools, public works planning, public buildings, of course, and as been said by others, obviously every department needs to buy into this.
Given the disasters in Houston, Florida, and Puerto Rico, how can Quincy make sure it deals better with stronger hurricanes and floods? 90 seconds or less.
This is a very good question at this time with all the catastrophic events that have happened over the last 10 years. And don't forget Katrina. A little bit to get a background is we need to have a plan in place. I know that Quincy High School and North Quincy High School are great areas for center points, but what we really need to concentrate on is our seniors and our children. Those are going to be the two people that are, you think about these natural disasters, you think about the people that are, someone like myself could probably get out of the house, but we have to have some type of plan in place for our children and our seniors to get out of these buildings. We need to put this plan in place and have, a benchmark on how do we do this. And it's something that we need to institute at the mayor's level, at the city council level, at the school committee level, where everybody's on a consensus for this to happen. It could happen at any point. We had a lot of hurricanes that have gone through in the last few months, I guess I could say. And we always get the tail end of that rain. We get the rainstorm. Sometimes it goes out to sea, but sometimes it hits us. We get, a whole day of rain. So we need to institute and have something in place. And that is going to start with protecting our seniors and getting our children to the right places. We need to have center points. I would like to install ward counselors, have, this is your ward, this is where you're going to go, this is where we have a plan in place. The at-large will oversee, the three at-larges will oversee the ward counselors and the mayor's office as well. So we have a plan in place, and activists like yourself can be involved in this process. But we need to look at this a little more deeply. Thank you.
Good luck to the Ward 1 Council. You'll need a few clones to be in all those different places. 27 miles of coastline. We have a lot of opportunity to improve our coastal resiliency with marsh restoration, tide gate repairs, seawall repairs, and ensuring all our building in the floodplain is done in compliance. I have served on the Boston Harbor's Geographic Response Planning team. This is a lot of what I've done above and beyond my work outside the council chamber. The city of Quincy has a hazard mitigation plan. We have an evacuation plan. The entire Boston Harbor region has an evacuation plan. It is about partnerships with our emergency management officials as to what our needs are in this community and what the response is during a storm event. Residents in the neighborhood of Post Island, we're on the phone before every storm talking about our plan, our game plan, tide gate controls, what we can do for flood storage, compensatory storage. I think there's, we have a lot of vulnerability in Quincy. The city is taking a look at our seawall conditions, putting in for our grants and funding these repairs. We have been very consistent. We have been cleaning out, we were talking about this earlier, the catch basins. The Saxon Field area was an area chronic for flooding. We've seen significant improvement, cleaning catch basins, fixing the tide gates along Broad Street. We were saying earlier, natural breakwater solutions. What else can we be doing that's a new solution for our area? Coastal storms are real. The impact for the Quincy coastal community is real. We have a lot that we can be doing in organizations like this, and getting you engaged as well is beneficial for all of us.
100% $147,000 of funding to repair and to reinforce our seawall. Like my colleague said, we do have 27 miles of coastline here. We have very old infrastructure, and we need to make sure that we're staying up to date and that we have the protections in place when there is a storm that comes down the pike. That is matched with $441,000 of state spending, and that is one step in the process. But the other is to make sure that whatever we do set up, we're checking constantly. The last rainstorm we had not too long ago, but a couple of weeks ago, I got 2 calls within 1 hour of each other at 9 o'clock in the morning that there was flooding in the Wollaston area. We sent somebody out, we cleared it out. But the problem is that the storm drains were clogged. All of the leaves that are coming down right now ended up clogging some of those outlets, and that's what caused the flooding. So once we got those clogs out, everything was fine, but we can be proactive. We also need to make sure that we're enforcing these things that we set up for ourselves to protect us, and that we're going out and checking them consistently. You know, and we do certainly have emergency preparedness plans in place, but our climate is changing, the world is changing. What could work 5, maybe even 10 years ago, may not be what's going to work for us in the next 5 years. So we need to make sure we're staying consistent on top of that emergency preparedness plan. I understand the administration is going through it right now to review it. And as your council, I want to make sure that we hear from folks like yourself so that whatever new plan comes down the pike every year, every 6 months, that we're staying up to date as much as possible as to what to expect with the weather as the climate continues to change.
So many of the things that my fellow colleagues up here have been discussing are things that we should be doing day to day in the operations of the city. But we also have to be proactive in understanding what's actually happening within our community, within our state, and the educational environment. UMass Boston right now has a study that's going on, and they're working with professors and doctors in the Netherlands to research how we can prevent, Boston can prevent the floods of the future. When you're looking at Hurricane Sandy, what's happened in Texas, what's happened in Puerto Rico, it's really about being proactive about how we can protect our coastlines in Massachusetts. And Boston right now is talking about, and it's a study that's happening right now, that I don't think Quincy's at the table being a part of the conversation, but the study is about putting dikes along the waterfront in Boston to prevent Logan Airport from being tragically offline because of it. By putting the dike, it would protect Boston. As it goes around the coastline, it's going to be from Quincy to Deer Island. That dike would mean that we are on the wrong side of the dike. That means that flood would be coming to us if that was to happen, if we don't put ourselves at the seat of the table to make sure we're part of that conversation. The third part would be bringing the dike all the way down to Hull. The fact of the matter is those conversations are starting to happen now, and very often in Quincy we're reactive to things. What happens is we're not part of the conversation, we don't know what's going on, and when it becomes a reality, it's too late for us to be part of the solution. We need to be part of those conversations now. We need to be part of the climate controls for mayors to know what's happening so that we can know what's happening in other communities, the studies that are happening, so that we can know how we're going to lead into the future. Then we also have to manage the city day to day, as we just said, so that when we do have the rains, we can manage it. But we have to do it more than just managing. We have to also look to the future of how we're going to prevent.
I would answer by saying we need 3 Ps. We need to plan, we need to be prepared, and we need to be proactive. By planning, we need to get all the players at the table, not only the city of Quincy, but our regional partners, as well as our utility partners, National Grid and others, because that's a significant part as to how the city is going to respond to any emergency, obviously electricity, gas, those types of issues. We need to be proactive. When I became the Commissioner of Public Works, and those of you who live in the city and live by catch basins know that perhaps 8-9 years ago, there might have been some things growing out of that catch basin, whether it be grass or full all the time. One of the things that we are committed to doing as a Public Works Department right now, we were guaranteeing folks, and we have thousands of these catch basins, but that's the key entranceway to our system. And the better we maintain that, the better flood capacity we have. So it did make a whole lot of sense that we just wouldn't maintain those things. So we need to continue to maintain them. We committed ourselves to cleaning these catch basins at least once every 2 years. Some are cleaned 3 or 4 times a year. We need to clean our drain lines. We need to be proactive in making sure that we're doing the best we can with an aging infrastructure to make sure that we can accommodate some of these significant storms. And lastly, we need to be prepared for what is happening, which means long in advance of any storm, we need to get all the players together to plan for the future.
He had part of what I was going to say, but mine's a little more involved. as 30 years of experience designing software for medical devices and other industries, it's analyze, plan, prepare, act, and evaluate. Because basically what it is that you have to do that in a circle. I write documents. Almost half my time is spent writing documents for the FDA to get certifications for the devices that I've designed. Stuff like cardiac injector to high-speed inject cardiac fluid into a patient. You wouldn't believe the amount of documentation that's required, and you have to do a lot of planning, and because this stuff can kill people. And so I'm used to doing this and taking the data, crunching it, and then determining the direction to go in. And that's basically what I would do.
Thank you so much. That was great. Round of applause for everybody. The first question in this session for the ward candidates will go to David McCarthy, and we'll keep all of the ward people together in the answers so that people can kind of compare more easily, and then we'll kind of go back and forth. But so the first question is, why should a voter whose main concern is climate change choose you instead of your opponent? 90 seconds or less.
Can you say that again?
Oh, sure. Oh, sure. Why should a voter whose main concern is climate change choose you instead of your opponent? 90 seconds or less.
Thank you, Maggie. Dave McCarthy, running for Ward 1, for those who don't know me. What I've had over the years on my school committee career over the last 12 years was a baptism into the world of environmental issues. I was a big supporter of the solar panels that are on most of the schools that bring in, I think, 10% of the municipal load that is here in Quincy, which is about 2,000 homes. I'd love to keep moving that on and move with the definitely the LED program and see if that's successful, because that would also bring in another 8 to 10%. So I think my experience over the last 12 years, really over the last 5 or 6 solidly on the school committee, brought us into a vision of making sure that our schools and our public buildings were energy efficient. And the administration has been very supportive. One thing that I did talk about a little bit when I was up here a few years ago was some of the schools that are out there that do need some of their lighting and some of their issues, timers, to make sure that some of the lighting is turned down at night. A lot of times you go by some of our schools and they're lit up like a Christmas tree. So I want to make sure that gets more efficient. So I think my experience over the last number of years would be a reason to vote for Dave McCarthy.
First of all, thank you, QCAN. This has been a really great night. I've really enjoyed the first half of this, and thank you all for being here. I think the answer to my question was kind of made by Dave here. I think Dave feels the administration is on the right track, doing enough. We just keep doing what they're doing, keep going down that road, and I don't feel that way. I'm scared to death of climate change. We have been too casual about it. Inconvenient truth is, I don't know, 15 years old now, 10 years old. How long is it going to take before we take it more seriously? So, in my opinion, the reason you should vote for me is because I'm going to take it a lot more seriously than the current administration. Thank you.
Joe. Hi, I'm Kirsten Hughes. I'm the Ward 5 counselor. Thanks to QCAN for doing this again this cycle. It's always great to hear from the other candidates and to get together and get to talk to to the folks. Simply put, I have voted in support of things that matter to QCAN, that matter to activists in this neighborhood and in the city, for things that matter, that are going to make a difference. I voted for the largest expenditure of city resources in generations to combat flooding in Quincy. $20 million, engineering, redesigning drainage pump stations, improvements, dredging of Furnace Brook, cleaning that out. So I voted in support of that project, as well as several projects at the schools, at Bernazani, at Beechwood, in making sure that windows, that roofs, that lighting was all as energy efficient as possible, including supporting the LED street light conversion that's going on throughout the city. Particularly, I know there's some stuff going on right now down on Haviland Street, changing our street lights over to LED, more energy efficient lighting. And so along the way in these last 6 years, I have supported every initiative, asking the mayor to put electric cars in the city's fleet, something that I felt was necessary in order to help us here in the city to combat climate change, to work in a more energy efficient manner. So again, I would just say, you know, why vote for me on this? Because I have voted for you. Thank you.
Okay. Sound okay? My name is Mike Hurley. I'm running for Ward 5. Thank you, QCAN, for doing this. And why you should vote for me on climate change is, for the last 21 years, I've worked for Massachusetts Department of Environmental Protection, where I am the chief of the data systems branch. I have worked on air programs, waste programs. I've worked on vehicle programs. I pretty much have spent my entire working career working on these issues. And for we were talking on earlier, is the issue of the composting. I was on the Quincy Recycling Commission, and I was eventually the chair of it when we did the Blue Bin Instant Win. So I have an entire career's worth of experience in these matters. Thank you.
Good evening. Thank you to QCAN for having us. And as a city councilor, I would encourage Quincy to take certain actions. I want to know if the city has any vacant or underutilized parcels of land where we can increase our solar usage. We've done a good job getting them on our schools, but where else? What about our other public facilities? What about our parking lots? I think we need a broader plan to assess and identify where renewable energy sources are possible. And then there's new construction. With so many new buildings replacing aging public facilities, we need to really dive deep into figuring out if we're doing enough to make these buildings energy efficient, or even where possible, make them self-sufficient when it comes to energy. My wife tells me something as she was going to work this morning at 5 o'clock. Believe in the science. Believe in the science. Thank you.
Thank you, Bill. My name is Ali Shaughnessy, and I'm running for Ward 6 Councilor as well. I guess as far as, you know, why would they vote for me as opposed to voting for Mr. Harris? Or I guess the way I want to probably look at this is the the LED lighting conversion for the street lights. That was instituted in the State House about 12 or 13 years ago. And just this year, they started doing it here in Quincy. So I would have to ask, and I wonder, why did it take 12 years before they actually started the program here in Quincy? And I think it's a great idea, and I wish that 12 years ago we had done that as well. I wonder why we have, and I'm not 100% sure on this, and I'm sure I'll be corrected if I'm not. We have our new high school, and I'm not sure if it's LEED certified. And is it LEED certified? Is the Sterling School that is being built now, will that be LEED certified? Do we know? Yeah? Okay, I stand corrected. That's good. Good to hear. Let's have more of those. Maybe we can get a school built in Squantum, since it's the oldest school in the city, and that'll be LEED certified as well. Thank you.
If the city could take any action to combat climate change, not including the things we're already doing, which action would get the most dramatic results in cost savings or greenhouse gas reductions? And what will you as a city councilor do to encourage Quincy to take this action? 2 minutes or less.
So I think we're already starting as a city, as a community, to take some of those steps. As I have been on the council for a while, I see a huge push, again, towards more energy efficiency in public buildings and making sure that the word gets out, that there's communication to folks that this is something that the city cares about. You know, again, I talked about some of the flooding, supporting making sure that the seawalls are adequate, that we are spending money and repairing seawalls. As was stated earlier, again, it's very important that we recognize as a community, as I think most everyone does, that we have almost 27 miles of coastline, and that really those important infrastructure improvements in storm drainage, in the tide gates, particularly down in the Princess Eve Marsh area, down in the not just in Ward 1, but in Ward 5, along the beach, along Blacks Creek. There's a plan in place now to take a look at what kind of improvements we can make down there. I think that that's an enormous step in the right direction to ensuring that, that we are headed in the right direction. But again, realizing that we are a coastline city and working in the direction of making sure that we're doing as much as we can to make the seawalls as strong as they can be, to fix drainage issues, to fix things, to utilize what we can of the marsh, to use the tide gates, to fix the tide gates that need to be fixed, and to really make sure that we're doing all we can with that. The next thing would be moving to public buildings, which is an enormous part of our budget, not just public buildings that the city services occupy, but the schools, which takes up not only a great deal of our budget, but a great deal of our public buildings. Making sure that those buildings are LEED certified, are moving forward, but also making sure that we're moving in the right direction and continuing on with making them as energy efficient as possible. Thanks.
Hello. Okay, this is, in some ways, it's sort of a bit of a trick question, but really the issue is, it's somewhat like going on vacation. The first thing you do is decide to go on vacation. So really what this issue is the city has to make a big decision, which is to say, this is going to be a big goal for us. We're going to do this on purpose, and this is where we're going. And then the answer then becomes, it's not one single thing. It's everything. So in everything the city does, it realizes this is one of our primary goals. We're going to buy new cars. We're going to get electric vehicles. If we're going to build a new building, it's going to be spec'd out from the very beginning. It's going to be LEED certified. We're going to use geothermal for heating. We're going to have solar panels on the roof. We should probably look again at the issue of windmills. But everything has to be done with an eye towards the end game, which is to reduce greenhouse gases, climate change, and it's all up front. You decide, this is what we're going to do, and we're going to do it in everything we do. And that really is the answer. Thank you.
Thank you. And I'm not knocking you, but unfortunately, there should not be a windmill on Moon Island Road, just to let you know, because it's not where a windmill should go, and I want to make that clear as a Ward 6 councilor. That should not and cannot happen. My predecessor fought it. I know my predecessor, I remember the night I was here 2 years ago, he said he didn't believe in the science because his father was a scientist, and with all due respect, we disagreed that night. But what I want to really stress, though, when I took office, I've been working with the state delegation to help take cars off the road. One thing was the ferry. The ferry system needs to improve. It fixes many things. It'll fix traffic, but it'll help the environment. How? Less gas emissions less cars on the road. That's what it really boils down to. We also need to improve our MBTA service that we have here, working with the state delegation. Again, LED lighting, which was mentioned, has been mentioned, been in deep conversation over, especially over the last few days before preparing for tonight. But talking with our state delegation, we're working on getting the LED lights on the state roads that's in Quincy, in all of Quincy, not only in Ward 6, but throughout Quincy. And that is really a very important thing. We talked about how long ago should have LED lights have come into Quincy. Well, I can only say that we have them. We, the council that's already in office, we voted on it, we supported it, and most of Ward 6 has it right now, and it's going throughout the whole city, going to be finished pretty soon. And but we got to get them on our state roads so Quincy is 100% LED. Thank you.
Thank you. Just a moment ago, Mike started talking. I wasn't sure where he was going with it when he talked about the vacation and so forth, but now I'm getting it. So it goes back to leadership, and it has to start at the top. And it was mentioned before by Ann Mahoney. It has to start at the top, and then it trickles down. Because if you have a leader, and I'm not saying that we have a bad leader. Any leader that's in the front has to lead. So if we believe as a community that we should be more efficient, have sustainable initiatives for the citizens, that has to come from the top, and all the citizens have to believe that and have some incentives for that. So if someone is going to renovate their house, perhaps the city could have some type of a credit would say you return, or you're showing that you're going to put in new bathrooms. Well, they have a low volume water flushing system, and you get like a $50 credit for that, like they do down at Lowe's or a Home Depot when you turn in your appliance or you're buying a new appliance. If you're going to do some recycling with your trash, which is a wonderful thing, let's have the incentive that they do more of it. You know, we have the MBTA here in Quincy, and I watch the buses go up and down Hancock Street, and I see the diesel fumes come out the back of them. And I wonder to myself, why is that bus diesel and not LPG? Why isn't that a natural gas bus? Some of the buses are natural gas, but a lot of them are still diesel. I mean, diesel buses went out with Nixon, for God's sakes. So I think that it comes down to some leadership, some initial forays into like, what do we do and what's it cost to say, have the initiative to make things more efficient. Because it's better for all of us, and it starts really with one person, and then it trickles right on down, and then we can all do it together. You know, if we all row together, the boat makes a lot of progress. That's all.
Just to touch on a few things that I think were mentioned during the large debate a few minutes ago. The electric vehicles, I know that they're voted in for the mayor and the administration to take a hard look at that. And it'd be a nice start with certain DPW cars and health services cars to make sure that we start at a low impact in regards to emergency vehicles and see how those work out. Hybrids haven't been mentioned at all. I think that's another good idea to try to work that into the system. I talked a little bit on the first question about building lights. And again, I go back and look at some of our schools where during the day you go down and visit a school and the lights are all on outside. And timers are old and they don't get looked at. And I'd really, get with the maintenance people and the custodial people and take a good hard look at some of the timers. Some nights Quincy High is lit up, like I said, all night long. And I don't know why it's not dimmed down. The seawall talk, Kirsten talked a little bit about that. I've been down and walked the seawall in Ward 1. I know that there's a project going on from the Willows up to Chickatawbit, but Babcock Street and the Manat Ave side, that side needs to be looked at too. And I know it's going to come down the road and we can't do everything at once. A big thing too that I think we should talk about too when we talk about things that we do that we're not doing now, we should also look to Braintree and Weymouth and regionalize, work together. I know we do some things in regards to buying supplies for the schools and other regional things with Braintree and Weymouth. But I think that would be a good route to work together also on new ideas that we can all jump in on and work together with. But it's those type of things, and I think you'll see the same answers rather from a lot of us, that we need to step it up. I think we're headed in the right direction. I said earlier, I know Mr. Murphy disagrees with me, but 10% with the LEDs coming down the road, 10% with the solar panels. I think we can work towards what we should be working towards is 100%, and just keep moving forward with a good effort and make sure we can afford what we're doing.
Thank you. It's my opinion that doing what we're doing is not going to get us to 100% renewable by 2050, which is what the Sierra Club recommends. And I'm not going to argue with the Sierra Club on this. I think they know more than we do about that. I mean, we up here. What I want to see is us looking into things like community choice energy, which is municipal aggregation. I think the city council could put this in front of the mayor this cycle, where we can buy our energy from renewable resources now. I went to the QCAN meeting. The guy from Mass Energy gave a presentation. We can switch to 100% renewables through our through our utility line now, and it won't cost much more. If it might even cost less. This is something that doesn't make people change too much, and it's a good introduction to the path to renewables. Other things we need to do is invest in infrastructure. We need to make the city more bikeable and more walkable. So every time we do a road project, we need to be thinking about how do we make this road more bikeable and walkable so that people can get around town other than their cars, which will hit a lot of targets with one arrow. We're going to lower our greenhouse gases. We're going to lessen congestion on our roads and in our parking lots, and we're going to have a healthier citizenry. And I think when you look at that, it just makes sense. Let's go forward with our infrastructure projects. Let's make this city traversable by those on bikes and walking, and especially for our seniors who are very concerned about walking as they get older, making sure that our roads are safe for them as well. Okay, thank you.
So we heard in the first part that the recycling rate for Quincy is just 15%. It's just 15% of people recycle. How could the city improve that?
Well, I think first off, and I think I answered this question the last time I was here, it starts right at the beginning with our children in the schools. We start with the schools, we educate our children on recycling, and then we move on, and especially especially in Ward 6, it's a very diverse ward. As folks come into our community, when we start having the programs that I hope will take place, such as the barrels that we plan on buying, the recycle program that we have, everything has to be improved. There's no doubt about it. This is our future. This is not our future. My future's gone, but it's our children's and my children's children. My daughter, who gets married 4 days after the wedding, my daughter gets married 4 days after the election. Her children and her children's children. That's what we're here for, and I thank this organization for what they do. Thank you.
I too believe that it's education, and it starts, at the schools, and that we should be supporting, and I'm sure we do in some ways, but perhaps even more so, supporting our teachers with the kids and at a younger age, and trying to maybe make it more fun and interesting so that they can learn about it at a young age and bring it all the way up and through, and they can then come home and teach the adults, about, don't throw that can into the rubbish, but throw that can into the recycle bin. So yeah, I would say it's education. And of course, I think the idea of composting is a wonderful idea. I believe that we should be looking at that as well. And the recycling cans, the new barrels that they're talking about. The incentive of having a larger barrel for the recycling bin, that's a great idea. And then a smaller barrel for for the trash bin, and then perhaps a barrel for the composting bin. Rodent control, I don't know how to address that one if you start doing the composting on the barrels out front. I'm not an expert on that. I wouldn't even pretend to be an expert on that. And perhaps the city should be looking at other communities and how they've done that. As Margaret LaForest had mentioned, she was out to Seattle. Maybe they can take a look at that city and say, well, how do you do the composting out on the sidewalk and you don't end up with a terrible rodent problem as well? So we have to bring in some experts that can help us and show us and teach us. Thank you.
In education, the schools, being on the school committee for 12 years, we pushed the elementary, the middle, and the high school level. You've done a great job. Councilor at Large candidate Dan Raimondi, as a DPW commissioner, mentioned what a good job the DPW has done over the years. John Sullivan in regards to recycling. The planning department and the public buildings, both of them, have to be involved with everything we've got going on in the city, either new projects to renovate schools, build new schools, public building-wise. They have to have a broader role. And the planning department also, in regards to developers, the downtown, anything we can come up with, ideas to get them involved to do more. So I think those two departments have to get a little broader. I know they mentioned QATV, and one other thing, if we could get to this point, when we talk a lot about recycling and the new trash pickup, if we ever got that in place here in Quincy, which would be a difficult task, I think, only because of the size of the city, but if it worked, you could build in incentives for residential and also commercial, but residents, with the assessor's office tax-wise, if you fulfilled a certain punch list and did the right things, possibly there'd be incentives to keep that recycling and push it up from 15%. So we're repeating a lot of the same ideas, but I think that Quincy's going to move forward. It's a rebirth with the downtown, and things are going in the right direction. I think that's a good time to jump in and try some of this. Thank you.
Thanks again. Well, I agree that awareness is the key. I think the government can set a better example about awareness on their website. I don't know, in preparation for this forum, I went on the government website and I had a lot of trouble finding these statistics about Quincy. I had a lot of trouble finding our rate of renewables, our rate of recycling. I went to the Committee on Environment and Public Health, and there was nothing there on that page. I called the clerk to see if maybe the documents weren't there, and the clerk told me they've never met. They have nothing assigned to it. So the government has to start taking this seriously. Now, have you noticed that during election season, we candidates feel the best way to get a hold of you is to knock on your door? But we don't do that for things that are important like this. I think the government should be out there canvassing neighborhoods, not just to run for office, but to say, hey, are you recycling? Do you know it saves us money? Do you know it saves us tax dollars? Do you know it helps the environment? What can we do to make you recycle? So what I'm saying is we can do more. And it starts at the top. It starts at the mayor and the city council level. When we take it seriously up here, the citizenry will start to take it seriously as well. Thanks.
Oh, okay. So I think everything that's been said has been great, but I want to go back to something that I know Councilor Liang said during the earlier portion of the evening, which was community engagement. You know, when I became the council president, I asked Councilor Liang to head up the community engagement committee, and I think an enormous resource that we have as a community is new people coming who don't speak the language, who aren't as familiar with some of the city services and things that are available and what we want to be as a community. So I think that any discussion about awareness or trying to make people aware, look, my 2-year-old, told me to recycle one day. I mean, young children, people are more aware of this now than they ever have been before, which is great. But I do think an important part of this is engaging a section of the community that that needs to be brought in more and needs to be reached out to on that level, talking about, we do have a good neighbor handbook that we publish through the city. It should be on the website. It generally is. We recently updated our website not too long ago, which is phenomenal. I don't know if anybody's gone on, but there's always room for improvement, I'm sure. But and so one of those ways that we reach out to that community, engage that community, is by doing these good neighbor handbooks, talking to that community in their language, putting out the resources those folks need to let them know that that's important. So I think we always have to be thinking about that in terms of communication here in Quincy. We do a good job at it, but we could always do better.
This very room who were part of the Blue Bin Instant Win program that we did back in the day with the Quincy Recycling Commission to increase recycling. Recycling was really coming down to one thing, and it's a question of how bad do you want it. And if you want to really push recycling, you say if you don't have recycling in your blue bin, we're not taking your trash either. That's something the city can do. It's how badly do you want it? It comes from the top down, and some towns have clear plastic bags. If you have recyclables in there, they won't take your trash, or you'll get a fine. There's also pay as you throw, and that's where you pay per trash bag. So you buy them in bulk and what have you. But that way you're incentivized to actually recycle because you use fewer bags. There are tools like that you can use. That's sort of more of a stick program as opposed to a carrot one. If you want to go carrot, you could do the Blue Bin Instant Win program again. You could ask Mass DEP for a grant to fund some of this, or you could just focus strictly on education, both through schools, through the mayor's communications about DPW days and stuff like that, and the DPW itself. But really the question is, what are you willing to do to get to, say, 46%, 50%? It can be done. It just has to be a decision from the top. And that's all I have.
So many local towns and cities are saving money and reducing greenhouse gas emissions by using electric vehicles in their city fleets. Weymouth, Braintree, and Situate all use them. New Bedford has 24. The City Council has asked Mayor Koch to explore using electric vehicles for Quincy's fleet. What more would you do as a city councilor to assure that Quincy takes advantage of this opportunity? 60 seconds or less.
I think probably the first thing I would do is bang the drum a little bit up in the city council meetings and say, why has it been over a year? If we've asked and talked about electric vehicles, why don't we have even one in a year's time? And the electrical vehicles, a few years ago, they weren't all that efficient and they were very expensive compared to a gasoline vehicle. Now, the electric cars today are very efficient, and the cost is coming in line with the regular automobiles. So I guess the thing I would say is, what would I do is, why do we not have electrical charging stations already set up in the city? So when we do have electric vehicles, there's a spot to actually charge up the vehicles. And that would give the citizens a little bit of hope that if they bought an electric car, they may be able to charge it up, as opposed to just charging it at their house. And of course they could have solar panels in their house to charge the electric cars. I mean, eventually, through the correct leadership, we really could have a zero net, but we need leadership to do that. So if we talked to the city a year ago about this, well, why don't we have it yet? I don't understand.
Well, yes, I've actually spoken with the mayor directly about this. I'll continue to work collaboratively with him. My belief is that the administration will always keep an open door to any initiative like this. But I think I'll be incumbent on all of us to show that we can begin using electric vehicles, as was mentioned, in our fleet without substantially increasing capital costs or reducing the productivity of those vehicles. I've suggested a methodical approach that perhaps starts with the non-utility vehicles of our fleet, the cars that building inspectors or our health inspectors use, and to continue to find other alternative ways in our different departments. So thank you.
This is sort of a multi-step answer, but the first piece is you got to find out what's the average age of the vehicle fleet. Are they recent purchases? Are they leases? When is the opportunity to turn them over? You don't want to divest of a bunch of high mileage I think they're mostly Ford Focuses is what I see. If they're all brand new, you don't want to dump them now. That's a huge loss to the city and just net costs, but also the cost to the environment to produce all those new vehicles that you're now going to get. But in any case, you would need lots of infrastructure in place. You would need charging stations. If people are taking these cars home, they're going to need a charging station at home as well. This all has to be sorted out, and there needs to be a plan on it. But there's something we could certainly ask for is, what is the plan and when can we have it by? And then we can bring it back to you. And that's my answer.
So I just wanted to double check because I know there was some information that we had asked for this a year ago, and I just want to double check that this is something we voted on in May of 2017, asking the administration to study this. And I agree with Mike on this. It's not. It's not prudent to bring on vehicles and change them out if there's no need to. During budget season is when the different department heads come. They tell us their needs, particularly the police and fire, when equipment is necessary, when they need to change out vehicles. So I fully expect in May that the police chief will be doing that when he approaches the council with a request for his budget. And again, so we've asked the administration to look at the cost benefit, to do that cost benefit analysis for us and to report back. So that was May, and I know David had emailed me. I know several QCAN members came to the meeting that evening and were very successful in lobbying counselors to vote for that. And I was proud to support that, but again, I think we need to take a look at the cost-benefit analysis to the city, and when those vehicles are necessary to be turned over in the fleet is when that decision and eventual, discussion is going to happen.
Hi. So I guess I'd say that I'm new to politics and I'm new to this whole thing, and I know the wheels of government turn slowly, but you'll hear a lot of, we're going to look at this, and we're voting to looking at this, and what we need to do is, when it comes to climate change, though, is be more proactive. If I was on city council and we were talking about the electric cars, I would remind my fellow councilors that we don't have to follow all the time. We can lead sometimes. Braintree has doubled their fleet since they started their initiative, okay? I would remind them that electric cars, when they run, is the equivalent of spending $1.40 on gas, and that it would lower GHGs, it would reduce dependency on foreign oil, it would stabilize energy prices and create local jobs. And let's just start doing things. Thank you.
Thanks, Joe. I think we're back to, again, we talk a lot about electric cars, but I keep thinking of all the public buildings we have that we could really take a hard look at and make them energy efficient. The new schools we've taken care of. We've really looked hard at this. I know Sterling, Quincy High got mentioned earlier, Central, and I know we're talking about Squantum, but there are other public buildings out there that we could get more energy efficient. The electric vehicles are great, and I think we should get into the business again with some inspectional services, some health services, just to see how things work out. And we probably should have already. But again, city buildings, get more educated out there to even our own workers and our residents out there in regards to everything that was talked about tonight, recycling, and reducing our carbon footprint.
What would be your target for renewable energy as a percentage of the city's energy use in 30 seconds or less?
Okay. Percentage is currently 56%, and they have lots of those. So I would say the goal to shoot for now would be 30%. It is achievable, and you do a benchmark to move forward. But for that, we actually have to know where our rate is now, or else how much where we were going. But my answer is 30%.
So if it's a goal, I say why not shoot for 100? Why not shoot for as much as we can? I'm not going to sit here and say that we should top things off at a certain percentage. I think we should try to continue to do as much as we can as a community to get that percentage as high as we possibly can. I think we've talked about some of the ways this evening: awareness, education, taking some of the stances that we have as a council, as a city, as a group, saying that this is important.
As I said earlier, I'm with the Sierra Club, 100% by 2050. I don't know where we are now. So the question is, where are we now? Where will we be at 2020, 2030, and 40? Because it's not something we can wait and just overnight flip a switch. So wherever we are now, we should be 5 or 10% better next year, and so on and so forth. And it starts at the top. We need to get serious about it. We've wasted all our time to drag our feet. It's not about losing votes or gaining votes. It's about leadership, and we need to do it now.
100%. We're not going to get that overnight, but we have 10% right now with the solar panels on the school. As I mentioned earlier, that is a lot of homes. And the LED, which is in motion now, conversion, will get up to another 8 to 10%. Now, we've talked a lot about electric vehicles, and there's going to be other things that'll come up, but I think we can gradually head towards that goal. We're not going to get it in a year or 2 years, but we'll grow it. We'll work with QCAN and work with the administration and do the common sense thing. Thank you.
I would say that we have to set. Everybody would like to see 100%, but I think realistically, if we set some goals that are attainable relatively in the near future, as opposed to 100% in 50 years from now, so we can say 10 years from now, hey, can we be at 20%? I don't know. I would say we got to ask the experts, and let's look at other towns and communities and see what they've done. And when I went onto the internet, there's a lot of small towns in America that have made that and said, okay, let's make our goal 20%, and the next thing you know is 20%, and the whole community gets involved with it and looks to set attainable goals. So 100% sure, but let's set it at, maybe in 10 years, 20%, and then so forth.
Thank you, Ellie. We should set our goals high. The 100% renewable and clean energy is not too in the distant future, that's for sure for us. We've made great progress in a number of areas. I was proud to support the solar installation on our school buildings that today is producing, I think Dave touched on it, 2 megawatts of power annually. That's about 10% of our total municipal load. In addition, I was a strong supporter of the city's LED program that I mentioned earlier. Thank you. Thanks, folks. Thank you.
Thank everyone so much for preparing for this and for your time. Thank you for coming.